Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a rivalry that has shaped and continues to shape global politics for more than 40 years, Iran versus America. It's a story that's always in the headlines, but to really get it, you have to go back to a time when, believe it or not, these two were actually pretty close allies. So why are Iran and America such bitter enemies? We're going to get into this incredibly tangled history. It's a story packed with revolution, nuclear ambitions, and deals that were made and then broken. But the most surprising part? It all kicked off with both countries on the very same team. To make any sense of what's happening right now, we've got to look back. I mean, this isn't some new fight, it's a long chain of events that started way back in World War II. Every single one of these moments on the timeline, installing a new king in 41, the revolution in 79, that nuclear deal in 2015, they're all like dominoes that got us to the breaking point we're at today. So our story really begins in a pretty unexpected place, 1941, right in the middle of the Second World War. Britain was terrified that Iran might side with Germany, so they did something pretty drastic. They invaded, they forced the king out, and they put his young, Western-educated son on the throne, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the man the world would come to know as the Shah. Now, this new Shah, he was completely fascinated by the West. He didn't just want to modernize Iran's infrastructure or its economy, he wanted to change its very soul, to remake the country in a Western image. And he went on this really aggressive campaign of secularization to do it. And look, this was not a gentle nudge. We're talking about a cultural shockwave. The Shah's government actually banned the hijab for women. They shut down mosques and religious schools. They arrested important Islamic scholars. And in their place, Western-style parties and alcohol were pushed so hard that Iran, an Islamic nation, became a huge exporter of booze. For a lot of Iranians, this didn't feel like progress. It felt like a full-on assault on who they were. All of this aggressive change, this push away from tradition, it created a massive backlash. And that backlash found its leader, its voice, in one man, an exiled cleric who would use the simplest technology imaginable to completely change history. His name was Ayatollah Khomeini. And this slide, it lays out the whole conflict perfectly. This was the battle for the soul of Iran. On one side, you've got the Shah's vision, secular, Western, a pro-American kingdom. On the other side, Khomeini's vision, Islamic, traditional, an anti-American republic. These weren't just policy disagreements, they were two totally separate, irreconcilable futures for the country. You know, this Shah figured that by kicking Khomeini out of the country, he'd solve the problem. He just saw him as some harmless old cleric. What he completely missed was the power of this new, pretty low-tech medium. From his exile in Iraq, Khomeini started recording these fiery sermons onto cassette tapes. Those tapes were then smuggled into Iran, copied by the thousands, and passed around, spreading his revolutionary message like wildfire. And then, right at the height of his power, the Shah made his single biggest mistake. To celebrate 2,500 years of the Persian Empire, he threw what people called the most expensive party in history. We're talking French chefs flown in, dinners on solid gold plates, all in a city built from scratch in the desert. While he was living in this unbelievable luxury, a lot of his own people were struggling. That one party became this powerful symbol of just how out of touch he was, and it cost him dearly. As the Shah's support just completely collapsed, he fled the country. And Khomeini, after 14 years in exile, returned to an absolutely incredible hero's welcome. An estimated 7 million people poured into the streets to greet him, a world record. The Islamic Revolution was no longer a threat. It was a reality. And almost right away, the atmosphere changed. Chants of death to America started filling the streets. A group of revolutionary students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. This was it. The 40-year-long rivalry between Iran and America had officially and violently begun. Okay, so after the revolution, Iran gets plunged into this brutal 8-year war with its neighbor, Iraq. And coming out of that, the new leaders in Iran decided they needed something to guarantee they would never be that vulnerable again, especially against powerful enemies like America and Israel. They decided they needed the ultimate insurance policy, a nuclear program. So how does this all work? Well, it really boils down to this one process called uranium enrichment. You can think of it like a super-fast washing machine. If you spin raw uranium a little bit, say to 5% purity, you get fuel that can power a city. But if you keep that machine spinning and get the purity way up to around 90%, you get the material for a nuclear bomb. And that dual-use capability, that's the core of this whole mess. Fast forward to after 9/11. The U.S. military is now in Afghanistan and Iraq, right on Iran's borders, and Iran gets labeled part of an axis of evil. In response, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, issued what's called a fatwa. It's a religious ruling saying that building nuclear weapons is forbidden in Islam. It's haram. But the question everyone asked was this a genuine religious belief, or was it, as critics claimed, just a clever lie to protect the program from attack? Well, the rest of the world wasn't convinced, and that suspicion led to absolutely crippling international sanctions. These sanctions just hammered Iran's economy, and eventually they created enough pain to force Iran's leaders to come to the negotiating table. And you can see the impact of those sanctions right here. I mean, it's just staggering. Before the really tough sanctions hit around 2009, Iran's economy was actually growing. But look at what happens after. It just completely collapses. That kind of economic freefall puts an incredible amount of pressure on any government to do something, anything, to stop the bleeding. And that pressure, it actually led to a pretty historic breakthrough in 2015, the Iran nuclear deal. The deal was simple. Iran would dramatically scale back its nuclear program and allow international inspectors. In exchange, the world would lift those crippling sanctions and its economy could finally breathe again. But that moment of hope didn't last long. The deal had some really powerful enemies. In 2018, the Trump administration called it the worst deal ever, and all by itself pulled the United States out. All those sanctions came snapping right back into place, and just like that, the two countries were right back on the brink. With the deal dead, the conflict didn't just pick up where it left off. No, it escalated into a new and, frankly, much more dangerous phase. We entered a shadow war. One that's not fought with armies on battlefields, but with covert assassinations, cyber attacks, and proxy fighters spread all across the Middle East. Now, through this entire saga, there has been one voice that has consistently been sounding the alarm: Israel. If you go all the way back to the mid-90s, Israeli officials were already warning the world that Iran was just months away from getting a nuclear bomb. And that warning just kept coming. Fast forward to 2010, and guess what? The message was exactly the same. Iran was still, somehow, just a few months away from building a nuclear weapon. And even right now, we hear that same urgent message. For over 25 years, the narrative has been that an Iranian bomb is right around the corner. It's become this constant talking point that has absolutely framed the public debate and driven the sense of crisis. And all of that brings us to today, which is basically a really tense stalemate. Iran has sped up its enrichment program to put pressure back on the West, while these secret talks to try and revive some kind of deal reportedly start and stop, usually getting blown up by another attack or some new escalation. You know, some analysts believe that certain key players, particularly within Israel's government, might actually be trying to prevent any new deal from happening. The theory goes that they hope to provoke a final showdown that could finally topple the government that was born back in that 1979 revolution. Now, whether that's true or not, it just shows you the incredible level of mistrust that has everyone locked in this dangerous cycle, making the answer to that big question more uncertain than it has ever been.